بسم الله الحمد لله الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, we will continue with the topic of Tafkheem and Tarqeeq, and we are discussing those letters that are sometimes heavy and sometimes light. The letter that we are going to discuss today is the letter Ra, and letter Ra has 8 conditions in which it is recited with Tafkheem or with heaviness, and in 4 conditions it is recited with Tarqeeq or light, and in 2 conditions we have an option to make it heavy or light. We can choose to recite it with Tafkheem and Tarqeeq both. Inshallah, we will begin with the 8 cases when the letter Ra is heavy. And the first one is when letter Ra has a fatha. In this situation, if you see, letter Ra has a fatha. So we will make this letter Ra heavy and we will recite this letter Ra with thickness and with full mouth. Instead of saying Ra, we will say Ra. Ramadan. We will make this Ra heavy and we will recite this Ra with Tafkheem. In the second case, when the letter Ra is sakin, we will see the letter coming before letter Ra. If the preceding letter has a fatha, we will make letter Ra heavy and we will recite this letter Ra with Tafkheem. If you see in this example, we will make this letter Ra heavy because it is sakin and it has a fatha on the letter which is coming before letter Ra. We will say it like this, Maryam. Instead of saying Maryam, we will say Mar. In the third case, when a letter Ra is sakin and the letter before letter Ra is also sakin, but the letter before that sakin letter has a fatha. If you see in this example, so letter Ra is sakin, the letter before letter Ra is letter Sad, which is also sakin. So in this situation, we need to go back to the third last letter. If letter Ra is the last letter, then second last letter is also sakin. So we will see the third last letter. If that has a fatha, we will make this Ra heavy and we will recite this Ra with Tafkheem. We recite it like this. Asr. Letter Ra with full mouth, with thickness and Tafkheem. Asr. In the fourth condition, if the letter Ra has a Dhamma, when a letter Ra comes with Dhamma, sometimes we forgot to make our back of the tongue up and we say Ru instead of Ru. I will try to pronounce a letter Ra with Dhamma one time without elevating my back of the tongue and the next time with the elevation, and you try to notice the difference. Ru, 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 Ru. And you can hear the difference when my letter Ra is full mouth with Dhamma, the sound is slightly different. So you will say Ruh, Ruh. The fifth condition is when letter Ra is sakin and the letter before the letter Ra has a Dhamma. You can see in this example, letter Ra is sakin and the letter before letter Ra has a Dhamma. So you will say Al-Qur'anu. Instead of saying Al-Qur'anu, instead of saying Qur, say Qur, Qur, Al-Qur'anu, Al-Qur'anu. The sixth condition is when letter Ra is sakin and the letter before letter Ra is also sakin, but the preceding letter has a Dhamma. So in this situation, you can see letter Ra is sakin, letter Sin is also sakin, but the third last letter has a Dhamma. So you have to make sure when you are doing the transition, Ra is an Isti'ala letter, you make your back of the tongue elevated. Ra, you have to recite with Tafkheem, but Sin is not with Tafkheem, Sin is not an Isti'ala letter. So you will say Khusru. Don't say Khusru. This is Sad, not Sin. Ra with Tafkheem, Ra is also with Tafkheem, but Sin is without Tafkheem. In the seventh situation where you have to recite letter Ra with Tafkheem is when letter Ra is sakin and the letter before sakin Ra is Hamzatul Wasl. So in this case, if you are starting your recitation from Hamzatul Wasl or you are continuously reciting from the previous letter or from the previous word, no matter if Hamzatul Wasl has a kasra in this situation, because the kasra in this case is not a permanent kasra or the original kasra, it's a temporary or conditional kasra. So you will recite it like this. Irji'i liman irtada. You will not say irji'i, no, you will say ir. In this situation, you will say liman irtada. You will not say liman irtada. You will recite the sakin ra with tafkhim when the preceding letter is hamzatul wasl. It does not matter if Hamzatul Wasl has a kasra in this situation, because the kasra here is conditional and not a permanent kasra. The eighth case where you recite letter ra with tafkhim is if letter ra is sakin and it is followed by an isti'ala letter, one of the letters of Hussadaq then killed, and the isti'ala letter does not have a kasra. In this situation, even if the letter coming before letter ra has a kasra, you will recite this ra with tafkhim. We see in this example. So letter ra is sakin. The letter which is after letter ra is from isti'ala. This is letter ta. It is from Hussadaq Tinkil. And this letter ta does not have a kasra. So you will recite letter ra with tafkhim. You will say kirtasin. In this situation, you see letter Sad is from Hussadaq Tinkil, one of the letters of isti'ala, and isti'ala letter does not have a kasra. So even if the letter before letter Ra has a kasra, you will recite letter Ra with tafkhim, and you will recite it like this. Mirsadan, mirsadan. You will not say mirsadan. You will recite this Ra with tafkhim, with heaviness, with full mouth. You will say mirsadan. There are four cases when we recite letter Ra with tarqiq or we recite letter Ra light. The first situation is if letter Ra has a kasra. So in this example, you can see Kareem. You will not elevate your back of the tongue and you will recite letter Ra light with thinness. You will say Kareem, Kari, Ri, instead of saying Kari. So you will say Kareem. In the second case, if letter Ra is sakin and the letter before letter Ra has a kasra, in this situation, you will recite letter Ra with tarqiq. You will say Fir'aun. You will not say Fir. You will say Fir. You will make this Ra light with tarqiq with thinness. Fir'aun. In the third case, if letter Ra is sakin and the letter before Ra is also sakin, but the preceding letter has a kasra. In this situation, you can see letter Ra is sakin, letter Jim is also sakin, but letter Ha has a kasra. So you will recite this letter Ra with tarqiq. You will say Hijr. You will not make this letter Ra with full mouth or tafkhim. You will make it thin, light with tarqiq. Hijr, instead of saying Hijr, you will say Hijr. In the fourth case, if letter Ra is sakin and it is preceded by a sakin letter Ya, in that situation, you will recite letter Ra with tarqiq, with thinness. Ya is considered as Ummul Kasra. You can see in these examples, letter Ra is sakin and letter Ya is also sakin. If you don't see any vowel on the letter, that letter is considered as sakin letter. In this situation, you don't see any fatha, dhamma or kasra on letter Ya, and there is no sign on letter Ya. So this letter Ya is sakin. When letter Ra is sakin, preceded by sakin letter Ya, you will recite this Ra with tarqiq. You will say Qadir, Kabir. You will not say Qadir, Kabir. Both of them are not right because I'm reciting letter Ra with tafkhim. So I have to make this Ra light. Qadir, Kabir. So in a situation when letter ya comes in a lean condition, what is a lean condition? When letter ya is sakin preceded by a letter having fatha. So in this situation, if you see, so letter ya is sakin, and if I'm choosing to stop, I will make this raw sakin as well. Sakin letter ya preceded by a letter that has a fatha. So in this case, I will not recite it according to the third condition of a heavy raw, which says when letter raw is sakin, preceded by a letter which is also sakin, and that sakin letter has a letter before it that has a fatha. So you make this letter raw heavy. You will not recite this raw with tafkheem. Why? Because the letter which is coming before raw is letter ya, and that is in a sakin situation. You will make this raw light when you are choosing to stop. You will say khair instead of saying khair. You will recite this letter ra with tarqeeq. So whenever sakin ya comes before letter ra and you are choosing to stop, you will recite ra light with tarqeeq. You will recite khair, in this case ghair, in this case when you're choosing to stop, dain. But if I'm not choosing to stop in these examples, so I will follow the vowel. The rule for dhammatain is exactly like the rule of dhamma. So I will say khayrun. I will make this ra heavy. I will recite with ra with tafkheem. In this case, when I'm choosing to continue, I will recite this ra with tafkheem. I will say dayra. But in case of stopping, I will say khayr, ra with tarqiq. غير ra with tarqiq. ضير ra with tarqiq. All of these ra I will recite with tarqiq when I'm choosing to stop. But upon continuation, you will follow the vowel. Now we will discuss those two cases where both tafkheem and tarqiq of the letter ra is allowed. The first one is if the letter ra is sakin and the letter before letter ra has a kasra, but the letter after letter ra is an ista'ala letter and it has a kasra or kasratain. In this situation, we have the option to recite letter ra with tafkheem and tarqiq. But this is only in case of continuation, because upon stopping, we will follow the eighth rule of heavy ra, which says when the ra is sakin and it is followed by a letter of isti'ala which does not have a kasra. So in this situation, when you are choosing to stop, you will stop with a sakin off, then you will make this ra heavy. But in case of continuation, when the letter coming after sakin ra has a kasratain or kasra, you have two options, whether to recite it with tafkheem or tarqiq. Both of them are allowed. You can recite it like this, firqin or firqin in case of continuation. In case of stopping, you will say firq. Only one option, which is to make letter ra heavy. So you have two options when you are choosing to continue in case of this word, and this only happens once in the Quran in only this word. In Surah Ash-Shu'ara, ayah number 63. The second case where you can recite letter ra with tafkheem and tarqiq, and both of them are allowed. In this case, if letter ra is sakin and the letter before letter ra is also sakin, but it is an isti'ala letter, it is from qussa dhaqtin kil, and the letter before that isti'ala letter has a kasra. We can see in these examples, and we can only apply this rule when we are choosing to stop. Because in case of continuation, we will follow the vowel or the haraka of the letter ra. So in this situation, if I'm choosing to continue, ra has a kasra. So I will make the letter ra light. In this situation, I will recite the letter ra with tafkheem. I will follow the vowel of letter ra. So tafkheem and tarqiq both are allowed only when you are choosing to stop. In case of continuation, you will follow the haraka or the vowel of the letter. When I'm choosing to stop, I will put the sukoon on letter ra, and now I have the option of making it heavy or light both. So I can recite it with tafkheem, ayn al-qitr, or make it light, ayn al-qitr, misr, with tafkheem and with tarqiq, misr. option to recite both Tafkheem and Tarqeeq is only when I am choosing to stop, because in case of continuation, I will follow the vowel of the letter. That's the end of our lesson. I hope all the conditions of letter Ra are clear to you. Inshallah, we will continue with the next topic. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.